There is a precise kind of silence that only exists in hospital hallways at 2 in the morning. It isn't peaceful. It's heavy, cold, and thick with the sterile scent of antiseptic and fading hope. I sat on a vinyl chair outside room 408, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, praying with every breath I had left for my 32-year-old daughter, Clara. Inside that room, she was fighting for her life while bringing a new one into the world. My name is Arthur. I'm 58 years old, a retired high school history teacher who thought he had seen enough of the world to understand how people worked. But nothing in my nearly 6 decades prepared me for the quiet horror of that night. Across the waiting room stood Clara's husband, Mark. He was 34, wearing a crisp tailored shirt that looked completely out of place in a maternity ward. While my knuckles turned white from gripping my coat, Mark was staring down at his phone, his thumb flicking rapidly across the screen. Every few minutes, a faint grin would touch the corners of his lips. He was texting someone. He was whispering into his phone, his voice hushed, almost giddy. When the head surgeon, Dr. Miller, finally stepped through the double doors, his face was pale, his shoulders slouched under the weight of terrible news. He pulled off his surgical cap, looked straight at me, and said the words that sliced my life into 2 halves, before and after. "I am so sorry, Arthur. We lost Clara. The complications were severe, we couldn't stop the bleeding." The world tilted. My heart shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces right there on that linoleum floor. I collapsed back into the chair, weeping silently, gasping for air as the image of my beautiful, vibrant daughter faded into a memory. But then I looked up through my tears at Mark. He didn't drop his phone. He didn't fall to his knees. Instead, Mark let out a long breath, stepped toward the window, and softly pressed a speed dial button on his phone. I heard him whisper 3 distinct words into the receiver before he even acknowledged his dead wife. "It's done." Finally. He hung up, turned around, and put on a sudden, exaggerated display of grief, rubbing his dry eyes and walking toward the doctor. But I had seen it. I had heard it. A cold, terrifying suspicion chilled me to my core. My daughter was gone, her newborn baby was crying in an incubator down the hall, and her husband was secretly celebrating. I squeezed my eyes shut, swallowed the bile rising in my throat, and realized right then that my grief would have to wait. Something dark was happening, and as Clara's father, I was the only one left to find the truth. To understand how we reached that horrific night, you have to understand the life Clara and Mark built over 5 years of marriage. On the surface, they were the picture of modern success. Mark ran a mid-sized financial consulting agency, always wearing sharp suits and driving imported cars. Clara, gentle and deeply trusting, worked part-time as an art curator while pouring her heart into making their house a home. I remember visiting them on Sunday afternoons. The house always smelled of roasted garlic and fresh rosemary. Clara loved cooking for us. Mark would sit at the head of the dining table, swirling a glass of expensive wine, talking endlessly about his investments, his upcoming promotions, and his high-profile clients. Clara would just smile, her hand resting softly on his arm, looking at him with absolute devotion. I was a quiet observer, often sitting in my favorite armchair by the window, watching the way Mark's eyes rarely softened when he looked at my daughter. He treated her like a prized possession, not a partner. But Clara was happy, or at least she thought she was, so I kept my small doubts to myself. Everything began to shift subtly 6 months into Clara's pregnancy. Mark's behavior turned cold and distant, wrapped in the excuse of work stress. He started leaving early for the office and returning long after midnight, smelling vaguely of unfamiliar floral perfume and sweet cocktail mixers instead of his usual cedarwood cologne. When Clara tried to gently ask him about his hours, he would turn defensive, his voice raising just enough to make her flinch. "I am building an empire for our child, Clara," he'd snap, tossing his coat onto the couch. "The least you could do is support me instead of interrogation." One afternoon, 2 months before the baby was due, I stopped by their house to drop off a hand-carved wooden crib I had built in my workshop. Clara was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters. When she reached for a glass on the upper shelf, her sleeve pulled back, revealing a deep bruise on her forearm. My blood ran cold. "Clara, sweetie, what happened to your arm?" I asked, setting my tools down immediately. She quickly pulled her sleeve down, a nervous chuckle escaping her lips. "Oh, Dad, you know how clumsy I've been lately with the baby bump. I bumped into the edge of the granite island." She wouldn't look me in the eye. Her fingers trembled as she held her glass of water. A subtle, dangerous shift took place in my mind that day. A father knows when his child is hiding pain. I began to watch Mark more closely, noting the secretive phone calls in the garden, the way he flipped his phone face down whenever anyone walked into the room, and the cold, transactional way he spoke about Clara's multi-million-dollar life insurance policy, a policy he had insisted on updating just 3 months prior. The slow-burn suspicion was suffocating, but I had no proof until the doctor pulled me aside in that quiet hospital hallway. 3 days after Clara's passing, while the house was still stifling with the smell of funeral lilies, Mark called a private family gathering. He sat at Clara's mahogany desk, wearing a tailored charcoal suit, surrounded by Clara's grieving mother, her younger brother, and me. He wiped a non-existent tear from his eye and placed a stack of papers on the table. "I know this is painful," Mark said, his voice rehearsed and smooth. "But Clara would have wanted us to handle her affairs promptly. As her husband, I've already taken steps to settle her estate, including her life insurance policy and the deed to this house. The baby will stay with me, of course, and I've hired a full-time live-in nanny." I stood silently in the corner, holding Clara's personal laptop, a device Mark had frantically searched for since the morning after her death, believing it was lost at the hospital. I had quietly retrieved it from her overnight bag before he could get his hands on it. "Mark," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "before you sign any estate documents, there's something you should hear." He stiffened, his jaw tightening. "Arthur, this isn't the time for your emotional outbursts. I am her legal next of kin." "You were," I replied. I opened the laptop and pressed play on a video file saved in a hidden folder on Clara's desktop, recorded just 48 hours before she went into labor. Her voice filled the room, trembling but clear, echoing off the high ceilings. "If you're watching this, it means something happened to me," Clara said on screen, her eyes red and tear-stained. Mark thinks I don't know about his affair with his business partner, Evelyn. He thinks I don't know he transferred our joint savings into an offshore account in her name. Last week, when I confronted him privately, he grabbed me so hard he left a mark, and he whispered that if anything happened to me during childbirth, he'd finally get everything he ever wanted. Asterisk. The room went dead silent. Clara's mother let out a sharp gasp. Mark's face drained of all color, his lips trembling as he stared at the screen. "That's a fake!" Mark yelled, jumping out of his chair, his smooth facade shattering into raw panic. "She was unstable. She was hallucinating from the pregnancy." "She wasn't hallucinating, Mark," I said, pulling a second document from my coat pocket, a certified letter from Clara's attorney, stamped 2 days before her death. Clara legally changed her primary beneficiary to a trust for her newborn daughter, managed exclusively by me. She also filed a confidential police report regarding your physical threats. Dr. Miller noted the suspicious circumstances surrounding her labor, and the state medical examiner has already initiated a formal investigation. Mark took a step back, hitting the wall behind him. The man who had celebrated his wife's death 3 nights ago was now trembling, trapped by the quiet, meticulous trail of truth his wife had left behind. The legal and social fallout was swift and unyielding. Within 48 hours of Clara's video and attorney documents being presented to the authorities, Mark's carefully constructed world completely unraveled. The police opened a formal criminal investigation into the financial fraud and the severe emotional distress that contributed to Clara's tragic medical complications. As the truth spread, Mark's high-profile clients abandoned his firm one by one, unwilling to be associated with a man whose cold greed had brought about his own wife's demise. His business partner, Evelyn, turned on him immediately, attempting to cut her own deal with investigators to avoid fraud charges. The social standing Mark had sacrificed his humanity to build evaporated overnight. He was left entirely alone, stripped of Clara's estate, facing frozen bank accounts, impending lawsuits, and the heavy weight of public disgrace. Justice in this life doesn't always come with dramatic fanfare. Often, it is the quiet, undeniable weight of truth returning to settle the score. In the months that followed, I took my granddaughter home. I named her Clara, after the brave mother who fought through her final days to protect her child's future. Sitting in the quiet nursery late at night, rocking little Clara to sleep as the moonlight streams through the window, I often look down at her small, trusting face and see her mother's eyes staring back at me. Loss changes a person forever. It leaves an ache that time never fully heals, but it also reveals a strength we never knew we possessed. I realize that true honor isn't about power or wealth, it is about protecting the ones you love, standing up for the truth even when your heart is broken, and ensuring that light always finds its way through the darkest nights. Thank you for listening to this story today on Dad Revenge Lab. Life often brings us to our knees with unexpected betrayal and profound heartbreak, but it is in those dark moments that we must find the courage to stand firm for justice and those who depend on us. If you were in my shoes, would you have found the strength to keep fighting through the fog of grief to protect your grandchild? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. Until next time, take care of yourselves and look out for one another.